Hey, welcome inside Storming the Field. Week 10 is finally here, and we're feeling the boom. That's a little foreshadowing for you. I'm Steve Bender.
And I'm Ian Oliver. Yeah, booming big time, both on the gridiron and in the podcast booth today. It's not so subtle, right? We've got today's guest, nothing short of a legend in two venues, the football field and the broadcasting booth. 14 seasons in the NFL and an NFL MVP, decades on the mic, breaking down the most compelling football games of our time.
Yeah, household name. The man knows how to throw the rock. He knows how to analyze the game. And he's a great person to talk to about how the weather plays a big factor. The teams he played for were in the north. He had some big notable weather games, of course. Let's talk to him now. Boomer Esiason. Boomer, thank you so much for joining us here on Storming the Field.
Hey, Steve and Ian, great to be with you guys. It's great to see you guys are inside, not outside, battling the weather. But I will say this: I love your show, and I actually love everything about you guys. I was telling your producer off air that you guys, for some reason, in my streaming queue, Fox Weather is like the first thing that pops up. So you guys are right there, and you're always present, and I'm always paying attention.
Yeah, much appreciated. I have to shout out Bob Van Dillen because he listens to you and Gio every morning on WFAN on the way in, on his way in from Jersey. He's a big Rangers guy, G-Man too, which we'll save the save the G-Man jokes for later.
We shipped them overseas this week, the G-Man. But Boomer, I want to talk to you. Okay, you have such an amazing career, and you've obviously an analyst, a commentator on all of this. When you think about your career and just weather, right? We're a weather and football podcast. Yeah. Is there a game that just jumps to the forefront of your mind that you think about, man, that was a beast to go through?
Well, first I'm going to talk about the AFC Championship game in 1982. Now, I was not with the Bengals. I was sitting at home with my girlfriend at the University of Maryland, and I was watching this playoff game in a 59 below zero game between them and the San Diego Chargers. If you remember that game, I don't know if you do or not. And I was saying, man, I hope the Bengals don't draft me. I do not want to go there. That looks miserable. And sure enough, 2 years later, I get drafted by the Bengals and end up playing there. Now, there was really only one really bad weather game that we played in, and that actually happened to be out in Denver in 1986. I think it was at the end of November. We fly into Denver, and we're playing at Mile High Stadium, of course. That Saturday, it was 50 degrees. It was a beautiful, sunny Colorado day. We're out in the field, just kind of going through a run through and a walk through to get the flight out of our system. And the next day we show up, and I think there was about 2 feet of snow that fell that night. And I do remember getting to the game, and we were playing in flurries and everything else, and we ended up losing the game 38-24. But we were in the midst of an amazing comeback in the fourth quarter, and we were on the move to score the game-winning touchdown. And I'm going to take credit for this. We're playing out there at Mile High. It was snowing. It was so loud at that stadium. They have some of the best fans in the NFL. We could barely hear ourselves talk, and I was in shotgun. And as I was trying to send one of my receivers in motion, the center thought I was calling for the ball. His name was Dave Remington. He was a great college football player at the University of Nebraska. And all of a sudden, I saw this ball sailing past my helmet. And I'm like, oh, Jesus, is that the football? Because if it is, we're in trouble. And sure enough, it was. And we ended up losing the game 34-27 or 28 or something like that. But anyway, after that, the silent snap down, we actually invented it, where I actually lifted up my foot and then the ball was snapped when I was in shotgun, because our offensive line coach, Jimmy McDaniel, way back when in 1986, came up with that idea. So we didn't have to worry about the snap count and guys jumping off sides, or in this case, snapping the ball past the quarterback's head.
So that's football history, and it's some combination between the weather and the loud fans Mile High. Speaking of Denver, they got their first legit winter storm of the season this week. 8 inches of snow yesterday. There's another round coming. While we're on this, I have to ask you, do you love it? Because I feel like for players, you either love playing in terrible weather games or you dread it.
I mean, look at me. I'm Norwegian, so I'm an outdoor guy. I could not stand playing in domes. I think my record in domes is not very good. I know at the Houston Astrodome, I never won a game. So I think I'm 0-9 in my career at the Houston Astrodome. But playing outside was, and in the
At least they demolished it, right?
Right. No, they actually kept it up. They just built a new one next to it. So every time I go to Houston, I have to see the Astrodome, which is truly the house of pain for me. But I think playing in Cincinnati, playing games up in Cleveland, the old Mistake on the Lake, Municipal Stadium. Those games were unbelievable late in the season. It was always raining or cold. And I do remember two games in particular in the 1993 season when I was the quarterback for the Jets. We played a game in New England late in the year, and I'll never forget standing on the sideline, and it was pouring sideways. It was about 25-mile-an-hour winds, and it rained the entire game. It got so bad and so wet that I told the coach after the game, I said, Coach Kozlov was my head coach. I said, whatever you do, don't bring this stuff back on the airplane with us because it weighs 10 times more than it did before the game started. And I remember him saying to me on the sideline, hey, Boomer, you got to throw the ball into the body of the receiver. They can't catch it away from them. And I looked right at him like we were literally 6 inches away from each other. I said, you think I'm playing in a phone booth out here?
Yeah,
I can control where the hell the ball was
right.
going. Yeah, so that game was a 6-0 win against the New England Patriots in a driving rainstorm. There had to be 4 inches of rain in that game.
Boomer, I used to live down in Tampa before Fox Weather got going, and I moved up this way. All my buddies in our group chat, there was the decision that Todd Bowles made at the end of the Bucks.
Yeah.
He cited the weather. He said, it's nasty out here. Let's get this to overtime. Obviously, we know how that went. Is that a big consideration for your head coach when you're, or was this just kind of a one-off thing there? Because it felt like, I know straight up Monday morning quarterback right here, but you don't want to give the ball back to Pat Mahomes.
No, yeah, don't extend the game.
Look, if you know that, you would think his coach knows that, right? So Troy Aikman didn't second guess. He first guessed. He said, I'd be going for it. I think that's who was doing the game. And most of us all felt the same way. And the reason you feel that way, when you're a coach, you go into a game. You got to take in everything into account. There's a lot of different variables. Number one, who are you playing in terms, or how are you playing? How's your team playing? And by the way, Tampa Bay was missing two of their better players, Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, two wide receivers, two impact players. So you got to take that into account. You're on the road. You're at Arrowhead. You got to take that into account. You're playing against Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is virtually unbeatable at home in overtime. I think he's undefeated. Maybe the Bengals might have beat them once in the playoffs. I'm not sure. But at the end of the day, don't take it and go longer against them. So all of us felt, if you would have told me that the Buccaneers had one play to win that game in those conditions against that team on the road in their building, I like my chances. I'm going for it, and I would have went for two if I were Todd Bowles. But he's a defensive coach, and they tend to be a little bit more reserved and conservative, and they think that they can win the game on defense, and I think that hurt the Bucs.
Yeah, and you think about an emotional leader like Baker, right? You just pull him off to the side and said, we need you, right? Yep. Right now, there's a dude that will show up and try to get you on that 2-point conversion. Boom, I want to ask you about what you were talking about, just kind of analyzing the game and commentating on it now. Is there a weather element that you think that is overlooked for just fans that appreciate the game, have been watching it for so long, but haven't gotten a chance to play it or play it at a high level? Is there a weather component? Because for us, Ian and I, we have a game this week where we talk about the road, the risk of weather impact. The one game we're highlighting is the Patriots versus the Bears. And the reason why it reaches the medium category is because of the wind. The game itself, you're looking at wind gusts 20 to 25, potentially some model runs saying 30.
Right.
But it's a pure crosswind because the orientation of the stadium is north to south. This is coming in out of the southwest. And when I'm talking to you as a quarterback, as an analyst, I mean, that's got to be the invisible threat that so many people overlook.
100%. And I played 3 years as the Jet quarterback in Giants Stadium, of all places. MetLife, too, has this problem, crosswinds. And if you can ask Phil Simms this, he'll tell you the same thing. Opposing quarterbacks who came into that building really didn't understand some of the wind patterns that we had to play in. And when you got days like this, 30-mile-an-hour winds or maybe wind chill up to 25 degrees, and you had all sorts of crosswinds, you'd have to know how to play within those boundaries. And I would say that there's no question that it will affect the game this week going on. And the rain doesn't bother me as much. The snow certainly doesn't bother me, but it's the heat and the wind. I can deal with the cold as well, too. I can get warm on the sideline. But when it's like 100 degrees on an AstroTurf field or a field turf field or there's 25 to 30 mile an hour winds and they're crosswinds. It also affects the punting and the kicking as well. And then the decision making when it comes down to the coach, because the coach wants to know from his special teams coach, how far out can we go for it? Where do I want to go? And now you start playing a field position game when the elements start taking place and have such a big impact on the game.
Boomer, I wanted to ask you because it's so funny. Anytime you speak to a true athlete, you ask them a weather question, it's like, oh, yeah, this game in 1991, it's like it was yesterday.
Yeah.
And it's just this like crystal clear memory. Is that the same when you're in the booth? Because you've analyzed so many classic games. I'd have to think many of these classic weather games, too. Right. Is it that same feeling, or probably not, but is it close to that?
Yeah, 100%. I was doing a game in Pittsburgh one night, and like I was telling you about the rain in New England that I played in, this was a game between the Ravens and the Steelers. These two teams hate each other. It's always physical. I think it was Brian Billick versus Bill Cowher. You know, this was mano a mano. This is Ray Lewis. This is Ben Roethlisberger. And I mean, it was pouring rain. And there was a punt, and I want to say that it was a Steelers punt to the Ravens. And the Ravens returner did not go after the ball, and the ball came down and it stuck nose right into the ground. And I couldn't have picked two better teams to actually play in these conditions. But as a broadcaster, you have to take that into account for sure. And whoever was doing the game in Green Bay and Detroit, I'm flipping all around now and I'm listening, so I'm not sure who's doing all these games. They kept talking about the elements, talking about securing the football. You got to make sure that sometimes coaches will go to the nth degree to prepare for something like this, because if they know it's going to be wet, they may make the players play with or practice with a wet football leading into the game. So it's all about ball security under those conditions. And certainly when the wind and the rain and everybody, all those different elements are whipped into a game like that, it certainly usually has an adverse impact on one of the teams.
It just seems like each year it's the northern teams that are thriving. We think right now the Chiefs, the Lions, the Ravens, all of these northern teams, Bills, and they have that exposed stadium, the outdoor stadiums. Do you feel like that just leans into an advantage, Boomer, especially for somebody who played Jets and Bengals?
Yeah, I definitely think it does have an advantage, especially if you have to go to Buffalo or you have to go to Kansas City. And if you are a dome team, that's why we all wonder about Detroit and whether or not they could win on the road if they have to go on the road and play in one of these cold weather cities. It may not be the case for them this year. They may have home field advantage throughout the NFC playoffs. And if they have that, they'll be in a dome in the Super Bowl down in New Orleans as well. So things could work out really well for them. But if you have to go to Buffalo, if you're Miami and you have to go to Buffalo, or if you're, I'm just trying to think, if you are another
we saw that last year, right? Or the Dolphins going to the Chiefs in that negative game, and people got frostbite. People went to the hospital. To your point,
that was the first week of the postseason, right?
Yeah, that's right. It was a wild card game. It's a real thing. I mean, it really does affect the warm weather cities or teams or the indoor teams. So if you're Detroit, most of the time, I don't know what Dan Campbell does with his team. I'm assuming he probably has them outside on grass practicing, because all the guys want to be outside on grass as opposed to indoors on the field turf if they don't have to be. So I would think that he has them outside, but their games are indoors, so he doesn't have to really worry too much about getting those guys acclimated to that. He just has to make sure that his team is in good shape in the fourth quarter, because every game that they play, because they are indoors, they're going to be hot. They're going to be warm. So, but again, like for them this year, home field advantage means they're going to be inside the whole time, which would be great for them.
ask you something, Boomer, because we've watched this game evolve so much, and we think about how it's going global now, right? More and more emphasis. We talked about going overseas this week, going to Munich, Germany. The game doesn't really have much weather-wise. It's just going to be another opportunity.
Perfectly average.
Yeah,
Sunny,
perfectly average. The teams
temperatures in the upper 40s.
The teams wish they were perfectly average right now.
Yes.
I don't know. Both of them.
Slightly below average.
Arguably, we could relegate both these teams right now. The Giants. But I want to ask you, Boomer, did you ever get a chance to, look at this game expanding overseas? Did you ever get to cover it? And is there a spot where you would like to see the game go to?
You know what? I used to do the World League of American Football, which was one of the first iterations of professional football in the offseason of the NFL. And it was when I was playing in 1990 and 91. They had teams in Barcelona, Frankfurt, London, and I think there was one other international team. I never got a chance to do any of those games. I did all the games back home, but what we saw in those games was just how popular the sport was overseas, especially in Europe. I was playing during the time where I think there were a few preseason games in Japan. That was extremely well attended. I'm surprised we haven't gone back there as a league. Well, I will say for the players themselves, I think they enjoy these trips. I really do, especially if they come back to a bye. If they have to come back and they have to play next week, I think that's tough. But I would lean into it if I were a player. I certainly would have enjoyed the experience.
I would say, too, when we're talking about numbers that start with B, Amazon's deal. This is the best Thursday night football we're going to do this season. Yeah. Full disclosure, we're recording this on Thursday, and I'm looking forward to that one. Let's get to the rest of, before we run out of
the best
time
of the
here,
rest.
Steve.
Let's get into
the
it.
rest.
All right, so we've already talked about the one game, again, highlighting for everybody that's watching the podcast or listening in. The big game that we're watching, of course, is the Bears and the Patriots. That's where we have that front moving through. That's a true wind impact.
It may sneak through early, but the wind will be hanging around, maybe an isolated shower.
It's persisting with that wind. Then we take it out towards the Broncos and the Chiefs. Another game at Arrowhead. Mostly sunny skies, and we're looking at temperatures warm for this time of year. That's another aspect of all of this, by the way. A lot of this flow coming in from the southwest means it's pulling warm and humid air in, stabilizing those conditions where you're not dealing with the temperatures plummeting at all.
And as Boomer said, the Broncos shoveling their driveways this week, taking their wives out to dinner in the snow. So they'll be headed east, but we'll figure out how the Chiefs can win their 58th ugly game of the year. They just keep winning.
They'd pick up, somebody like DeAndre Hopkins, and he shows out yet again. Everybody in the league saying, why trade to the Chiefs?
Yep.
They're like that person in the fantasy league that's winning, and everybody gets together and says, we don't trade with them, all right? Like, why? Why are we still trading with the Chiefs? Let's talk now. Areas that we did have concern because of Rafael, right? We talked about the fifth major hurricane of the season, made landfall in western Cuba as a Cat 3, now steering back west into the Gulf. Looks like that'll get shredded apart. Thankfully, Florida should be spared.
Yeah, thing made a hard left. Last thing anybody in the Southeast needs is another hurricane or major hurricane. It's no longer a major, and it's heading to the Bay of Campeche. It's doing something funky. You talk about forecast models. They struggle with that one for a bit, but it is just going to head west. Cooler waters, wind shear, dry air. Those will all do their thing, and we don't have to worry about that one.
So ultimately, what that means for everybody at home means the Bay, Tampa Bay, they're going to be good at Raymond James Stadium. You're looking at another warm one. I mean, mid-80s, not bad. And then Jacksonville also will be into the lower 80s. So prime conditions. Boom, I want to ask you, we're big into the betting realm here. I know that's kind of emerged. How's that for you? Have you seen that kind of explode on the scene?
And is there a lot of value with weather, as you were talking about?
I think there is, but it's amazing. I'm a spokesperson for FanDuel. So initially, I never really got into any of this. And I remember back when we did play, we were not allowed to take visits to Atlantic City, Las Vegas, or go on any cruise ship and be paid for it. The NFL was so stringent in their anti-gambling policies towards the players because they were so afraid. So where we are today to where we were back then is really it's a 180. It's just completely turned around and upside down, if you will.
We do the fortune forecasting, Boomer, by the way, and it's Bender's Best Bets, which we have now dubbed Bender's Bad Beats. I've been awful this season. So
it's Fade Steve.
Yeah, so whatever you're hearing right now, go inverse of that. And then Ollie's over and under. You've been solid this year.
8-2 in the last 3.
Okay, keeping track.
Nice.
I've been trying to not keep track of mine because it's been rough.
With the over Fiesta, I didn't go over Fiesta this week. I did San Fran and Tampa Bay over 50.
Okay.
I did think that they're figuring out ways to score, even though, as Boomer pointed out, they're down some of their best players. The Jets and Zona over 46. But I took Cincinnati and Baltimore, even though it's this marquee game.
Yeah.
The number was up to 53. They're going to score at will, I'm sure. But it's Thursday night, and these Thursday night ones are always they're funky.
Yeah, but you know what? The Baltimore Ravens seem to score 40 points every week.
Yes.
Right? So all the Bengals have to do is score 20 points, and you're a winner.
All right, Bender's best bets. I'm going Giants over the – I did all money line, by the way. I've made this as simple as possible. Try to make it so you can't miss. Giants over Panthers. I feel like the Panthers, yeah, they won, but the Saints are in shambles right now. And they also just traded – they're receivers. Like, I don't know what they're going to do on offense. So I don't know. I think Germany's going to be upset that we sent these two teams to them, maybe. They're going to be like, what's happening? But I think the Giants, I think they can pull it. They're going to win. Chiefs over Broncos. I just feel like you can't stop the Chiefs right now. They got too much momentum. It could be one of those sneaky games, though, where they're kind of overlooking their opponent. But I think Broncos, they've been solid. I still think Chiefs, though, again.
Yeah, speaking of rookie quarterbacks, Bo Nix.
Yeah.
He's been playing well at elevation.
Just remember, though, guys, the Broncos are coming off of getting hammered by the Ravens.
Yeah.
And I just from personal experience, the next week, if we had to play a team the week before that got hammered, we knew we were going to get an unbelievable level of intensity from that team because the coach is going to be on their ass all week long.
Yeah.
And the other aspect, if it's a team within the division, which obviously the Broncos are, these games are different because they know each other so well. And that's the same thing about the Bengals and the Ravens. It should be high scoring just simply because everybody knows everybody. And that's exactly what the case may be with the Broncos and the Chiefs. So if the Chiefs ever are going to get knocked off, it's probably going to be one of these teams within their own division that does it.
Sneaky trap game.
I mean, if you're saying that my bet's going to be wrong, you're probably right, Boomer. You know what? I'm betting on you saying I'll be wrong.
You said do the inverse, so I'm doing the inverse.
Okay, no, you're solid. We're talking about rookie quarterbacks. I mean, this guy, my next bet, Commanders over the Steelers. This was the one that wasn't a favorite. The Commanders, I think, are about a 2.5-point dog on this game. But I have the Commanders beating the Steelers just because Jaden Daniels has just been so impressive to me, and just that team in general.
He's been fantastic.
Yeah, what do you say? I mean, Boomer, as a quarterback, of course, and an analyst, just watching, there's so much emphasis on Caleb Williams coming into this season. Felt like Jaden Daniels kind of almost overlooked at times, and now you just watch what he's doing, and it's just so impressive.
Jaden Daniels played a lot of college football. He played both at Arizona State and LSU, so he played a lot of games. So he came in. The one thing about him, when I met him, when he brought his Heisman Trophy last year into CBS, I couldn't believe how thin he was. He's got a lot more growing to do. He's got to grow into his body. And what I worry about with him is just making it through the season and not getting hurt. Now, he's already got ribs.
Yeah.
So he's playing with some tender ribs. I saw last week against the Giants, it looked like he's learning how to avoid contact. And as long as he can avoid contact and make it through 17 games, he'll be the offensive rookie of the year, hands down. Nobody will even come close to him, not even Malik Neighbors with the Giants, who's having a great year himself. But Jaden is a lightning rod for the Washington Commander fan base. He has basically ignited that entire city. He's the one thing that both Republicans and Democrats can actually agree on in Washington. So yes. I would say that, yeah, I like that pick. I really do. But here's the only but for me. Pittsburgh plays a 3-4 defense, guys.
Yeah.
And you guys talking to me about weather and precipitation and pressures and all the stuff. The 3-4 defense to a rookie quarterback is a maze. And it is really, really hard to decipher. So it's going to be up to Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury to keep it as simple as they can for the young man, because this is going to be a defense like he has never seen before.
It's great analysis of that.
Boomer, I got to say, it's as opposed to just being in your face every time you turn your Spectrum cable box. Really a fantastic opportunity to talk to you about the game and about how weather impacts it. So really our pleasure to have you on Fox Weather.
I appreciate it, guys. Keep up the good work. Just know I'll be watching. I'll be watching you two guys.
By the way, if you want to connect with us, we are beyond just meteorologists. We're people, too. We want to interact with you. Ian Oliver, he always likes critiques. He wants updates on his forecast.
Love it.
You're always doing that to me every week, so this time I jumped the gun on that. By the way, social media, it's @WeatherBender.
And Ian Oliver WX. We'll see you next time right here on Storm in the Field.